In a world that seems shaky and unsure, in a life that feels uncertain and unclear, there is this place that gives shelter from the storm, not by the roof over our heads. There's this place that puts solid ground under our feet, but not because the floor is strong.
Sorry, guys.
There's this place that's fortified on all its sides, but not because the walls are sturdy. This house of prayer is not a building, but it's built on the cornerstone of Jesus, a foundation poured from the Word of God. We faithful gathered together, believers from all walks of life, followers of Christ, the body, the bride, sinners to be sure, but cleansed by the blood of Jesus, celebrating the new life made possible by the sacrifice Jesus made. It's here that we celebrate the good news, then go out to share it with a world in need of hearing it. This is the church. Come on in. You're always welcome here.
Good morning and welcome to the table. Will you stand and sing with us? When I'm in the roughest water, I won't go under, I won't drown. When I'm in over my head, I know that you won't let me down. And when I'm broken and down to nothing, I know that you are always up to something good. I know that you are always up to something good. You'll make a way. You'll make a way, whatever it takes. There's nothing your love won't endure. I know that you are always up to something good. Even through the deepest valley, you go before me, you are here. For I know you'll never leave me, your love surrounds me, I won't fear. And when I'm broken and down to nothing, I know that you are always up to something good. I know that you are always up to something good. You'll make a way, whatever it takes. There's nothing your love won't endure. I know that you are always up to something good. Through the darkest night, you are on my side. You are always faithful. Through my fear and doubt, you will lead me out. You are always able. Through the darkest night, you are on my side. You are always faithful. Through my fear and doubt, you will lead me out. You are always able. You're faithful. And I know that you are always up to something good. I know that you are always up to something good. You'll make a way, whatever it takes. There's nothing your love won't endure. I know that you are always up to something good. You'll make a way, whatever it takes. There's nothing your love won't endure. I know that you are The dark tried to hide you and steal you away. Death tried to keep you inside of the grave. The enemy fought you, he tried but he lost. You cannot be stopped. When we cried for freedom, you tore down the walls. The weight of our burdens, you carried it all. Our fears and our failures hang dead on the cross. You cannot be stopped. Mover of mountains, breaker of chains, Jesus has triumphed over the grave. Sing hallelujah, the battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. We stand on your victory and we shout out your praise. Miracle maker, you're mighty to save. Awesome in power, relentless in love. Oh, you cannot be stopped. Mover of mountains, breaker of chains, Jesus is triumphed over the grave. Sing hallelujah, the battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing. Oh, there is nothing. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing. Oh, there is nothing. There's nothing that can stop our God. Oh, no. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing. Mover of mountains, breaker of chains, Jesus is triumphed over the grave. Sing hallelujah, the battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. Oh, sing hallelujah, the battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies till all my fears are gone. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins, and I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God, and I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. You split the sea. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. 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 Will you pray with me? God, we are so grateful for all the ways you show us your love. Today we ask that our hearts and our minds are open, and that we reflect your love to the people around us. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.
It's all about a number. It always has been, even before I knew that it was. In high school, I amassed honors and extracurriculars. At Penn, I grabbed every internship, pledged the right fraternity, and got involved with the clubs I needed to distinguish myself from all the other Ivy League 4.0s. After doing 80 to 100-hour weeks on Wall Street as an analyst, I finally realized what I was chasing. A number. What my net worth had to be to give it all up. I met my wife while I was at Chicago banging out my MBA. Grad school was a cakewalk compared to the street. I played hard and we fell in love and made plans for our future. We would have 3 kids, a house in the suburbs, a summer place. I pushed myself harder than ever. At first, my wife was resentful of my long hours and my distracted attention, but then the kids came and she was just as distracted and exhausted as I was. And the kids, I coached soccer on Saturday mornings, showing up for all the lacrosse games and ballet recitals, but really every time I looked at them, all I could think about was that number. If I could get there, we would be able to really enjoy each other someday. I'd sacrifice when they were little so that they could have this amazing life, and then they'd look back and see that all I was doing was out of love for them. But the grind, it never ends. When I made VP, I was still on the 6 a.m. train surrounded by all the other blue suits, only now I was out with clients most nights, expected to help land the big ones and keep them happy. I was made a managing director at a rival firm. I was a rock star, moving heaven and earth because now I could see the light at the end. Once I made partner, I knew that number was mine. Sure, I still had crushing responsibilities, a huge staff spread over 3 continents, shareholders' unrealistic expectations, hotel rooms 10 days a month, but I was now sure I would finally catch that number, that thing I had been giving up my life for. That number would finally let me have long vacations with my wife and get to know my kids on a real level, surrounded by my family's love and respect. I mean, who doesn't want that? To feel that their whole life had been validated. Now here I am, the final lap. I'll retire at the end of the year. I'm still young enough to really enjoy it, too. One of the lucky ones to get out in time to really live.
It's really somber. Makes me choke up a little bit every time I watch it because I've been with people when they've died. I've sat next to their beds. I've helped them in that next stage of the journey. And I know you've heard this 100 times. Not once did somebody say, I wish I made more, I wish I worked more. How many of you feel like you have enough in general right now? How many of you feel like you have enough? I'm glad to see a few hands. How many of you think you have more than enough? I'm excited to see a few more hands. Today we're kicking off a new series, and this new series is simply called More Than Enough. We're going to be talking about the things in our lives. Why do we work so hard? Why are we always chasing the next thing? What is it inside of us that drives us to want to be better or want to have the best or to make more? I say that because I'm one of those people. For some reason inside of me, actually it's not for some reason, I know the reason. I've done some counseling. I've done a lot of counseling. I know why I'm driven to want to have more, to be more, to do more, to have more. You see, I grew up poor. I was homeless several times before I finished high school. And because I didn't have a lot in my life, that drove me to want to be something more than I was. To this day, to be more than I am today. And if you look around, the way we measure that is by what? How much money we have in our pockets or in our bank accounts or in our savings. That is what drives that. But why? Now, for me, I know part of it, right? Is it nature, nurture? Is it the way we were born, or is it something that we grow into? Is it something we learn through our experience? Why are we like that? Does anybody else here struggle with that? I'll be the first one. I mean, I struggle with last night. I was at a party with several, actually not too many of you, because those of you that are at the party aren't here this morning. Thank you, Jeff and Katie, for being here this morning. We were at a party, there was like 8 of us from church, and it's like a wine and cheese type of party thing. It's a wine tasting, and I'm looking around the room going, nobody's going to be there in the morning, right? And sure enough, this morning, none of them except Jeff and Katie are here. I also thought I'd see more red this morning in the audience, but I realized if you're a Chiefs fan, you're not here. So we're a little sparse this morning. That's okay. That's okay. But how many of us struggle with always wanting that next thing? And it doesn't matter what it is. Is it the next, fancy vacation? Is it the next car? Is it the next house? Now, here's the thing about vacations, cars, houses, and clothes. How many of you got excited when you bought your first house? Like, you remember that? Picture that in your mind, your first house. Stacy and I weren't engaged yet, but we were at a friend's house, and just on the street there was a house for sale, and it was a brand new house. Like, you go in and pick some colors and some furniture. This is back in 2004. And so we went to look at this house, and she's like, I really like it. I think we should buy it. And now, she didn't know this, but I had been looking at an engagement rings. I was like, so here's the thing. You can get a house, or you can have a ring. Now, guess which one she chose? She chose the house. Right, if you notice, I have a silicone ring because we don't, to this day, don't have fancy rings. I want you to think of that time when you bought that first house. It was exciting. Right now, for us, it was. It was down the street from our friends, and it was a house. Finally, we were going to be homeowners, our own place. We're going to make our own life. How many of you remember that? Was it exciting? Did you like it? Now, what's interesting is, a few years in, our family started to grow. I already had a daughter, but then we had a second daughter, and then we had a third daughter. And then my mom, who was divorced, decided to move. All of a sudden, this little 3-bedroom, 2-bath house had 8 people in it. And we're like, we got to buy something else. Now, ours was somewhat out of necessity, but when we're looking at houses, was I looking at the same house? Split entry, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2-car garage? No. I wanted the next thing, right? And I don't know about some of you, but my dream was I needed that 3rd-car garage, right, for my 3rd car. It's not true, I don't have 3 cars, but I have lots of tools and stuff. I needed that bigger house, because if I would have bought the same house, well, that wouldn't have felt good. That wouldn't have been fun. That wouldn't have been the thing. I needed something bigger. I needed something better. My first car, who remembers Plymouth Horizons? Gosh, or Dodge Omnis, same car. Dodge, Plymouth, pretty much same company, okay? So this is back in the 80s and 90s, and my grandmother had one as she passes away, and I don't have a car yet. I just turned 16, and so I'm driving this literal granny grocery getter. It's like a hatchback. They're the ugliest car ever made, right? Similar to a Gremlin, if you know what a Gremlin is. But when you car guys out there, Marco, I know you're a car guy. Why is it that we always want that? The next best thing, right? So I'm at the party last night with Jeff, and we were talking about houses, right? Because we've only lived in 2 houses. Well, we had an apartment for a while, and then a house, and then the house we're in now. So we haven't moved a whole lot. But I was talking to Jeff, and we were having this conversation, and so my mother, who lived with me for 14 years, we had to move her into assisted living, and my oldest, we're moving to Chicago this next week, and so prayers for that. That's a journey if any of you have ever done that. And I have 2 seniors this year. One's going off to KU, the other one's slacking, so I don't know what he's going to do, and he's sitting in back, so I'm giving him a hard time. But there's about to be 3 of us in this ginormous house. And so we're sitting there and we're talking about it, and Jeff goes, yeah, I when I was in my 40s, I did the same thing, right? Now, I'm going to call you out just a little bit. Jeff had an 8,000 square foot house, right? Enough for an entire football team. I said, 8,000 square feet? He's like, yeah, we had a what was it, a basketball court? You had a basketball court inside your house, right? Now, he's looking down, but he's like, in my 40s, that was important to me. I needed those things. Those things stood out to me. He goes, now I don't care. It's not as important. And we're talking about last time, I'm like, this isn't the sermon today. We're talking about this, right? What is it about us? Now, why do we do that? Why do you think that we're always wanting the next thing? Yes, for some of us, maybe we didn't have a lot growing up. Maybe we were restricted, or maybe we just didn't have access to it, so maybe we crave it, or maybe it's social media. That's all part of it. But because my engineer brain, I went to school to be an engineer, and I have to know why things work. I have to know how they work. Specifically, I like to know how people work, right? When I went to school, my undergrad degree is in organizational development, and then I went back to seminary. But if I were to do it all over again, it'd probably be something like anthropology or psychiatry, psychology, something, because I like to know what makes people tick. Why do we do the things that we do? And so, any armchairies in here? If nobody's saying yes, then that you don't know. Dax Shepard has a podcast, and it's called The Armchair Expert. And he interviews this guy, and this guy wrote this 1,000-page book. He's a neurobiologist, right? About why the brain does the things that it does, and why we do the things that we do. What drives us, what happens. And it's called Behavior. And so I listen to this podcast, and I buy the book, and I'm reading it. And in this book, lo and behold, it ties directly into this series about why do we always feel like we have to have more? Why is it that what we have is never enough? I mean, statistically in America, this is a common thing amongst the world, but it's never enough. I mean, every time we have a goal, what do? We achieve the goal, and then what's the next thing we do? You set a new one, right? It's the American way. And I'm not, especially at work, those are great things. If you're good at that, that makes you usually really good at your job. But in our personal lives, when we're constantly doing that and always have to achieve the next thing over and over again, then our lives become about getting things instead of being in moments. The mindset of that is we never have enough. So in this book, he talks about the psychology of that, about how the neurons in our brains work. Now, a lot of biologists and physics people, they don't believe in free will. And here's the reason they don't believe in free will. I find this interesting because I grew up in Calvinism, and if you're a Calvinist, if you know what that means in the church world, John Calvin was a theologian that was like, it's all predetermined, right? And I don't believe that, but it's interesting that in science, there are determinists. They think everything is not necessarily predetermined, but the fact that we don't have free will. And I'll explain that. There are neurons in our brains that fire, that go off, that connect, and then we make decisions. Their argument is that what influences the neuron? They don't believe there's anything else a part of us. We're just biology. We're just atoms and neutrons and protons and electrons and gluons and quarks and all these things, that we're just made up of material things. You see, I believe we are made up of material things, and they say you can't influence those material things. They can learn, they can change behavior, but those material things have a pattern and a path. And if you had a computer strong enough to map all those things out, you actually could predict the future. Now, I say there's something different. We're people of faith. Most likely, that's why you're here. People of faith say, yeah, there's atoms, there's things that are in existence, but there's something else. There's a spirit, there's a soul, there's a connection to all of us. We talk about these two things, this binary type of system, as our what? Our brains and our hearts. Our brains being our physical, our tangible, the things we know and understand, and our hearts being our spirit. And what I say is our heart does not answer to our brain. Our brain actually answers to our heart. Our physiology actually answers to our spirit. Our spirit can overcome these things. Our spirit is the thing that informs us to make better decisions, to make different decisions, to be more tomorrow than we are today. Not to have more tomorrow than we have today, but to be more tomorrow than we are today. We are spiritual beings, and that can influence our physiology, our biology. But in this book, he says, when you do something. Now, we all know about drug addicts and gambling addicts and alcoholics, right? Those are addictions that we are pretty well versed on. There's lots of resources for that. I would tell you, I've never met a person that didn't have an addiction. Now, your ego right now is telling you, well, he just doesn't know me well enough. No, no, no. If I dig far enough, I'll find your addiction. Because we all have it. It's how the brain works. It's how our physiology works. When I say addiction, so the mind works in such a way that it releases dopamine or serotonin or some kind of hormone into your system as a reward system. Our brain, our bodies, our physiology is based on a reward system. When we do hard things, it gives us a reward. That's based in, back in the day, right? We're out hunting animals. We're hunting the antelope in the plains of Africa. We're gathering the wheat and the fruits and the vegetables, right? When we did hard things, our body rewarded us so that we would do it again. It's why sex is pleasurable, right? I almost stumbled over that. I'm a little nervous to say that. But it is. Our body rewards us. It's for, right? It's for the survival of our species. We have to eat, we have to procreate, we have to do all these things. And so the body is designed in our minds and in our brains as a reward system to do these things. Now, what the problem is that we have not adapted to know of what's going on up there. So when you buy your first house and these hormones are released in your brain, like, oh my gosh, that was exciting. Let's do that again. Now, I don't ever want to move again. On my list of things of not to do, moving is probably number one. I hate moving. It is the worst thing. If you ask me to help you move and I say yes, I love you a lot. A lot. If I say no, that's the standard answer, okay? Just know that. But after that first house, we get that hit of dopamine or whatever that hormone is in our brain. And then, when we buy the next house, if we bought the exact same house somewhere, do you think you get that same hit of dopamine? See, in his book, Behave, where he talks about our behaviors and why we do the things that we do, when we're talking about things that in a reward system, and drugs and alcohol and gambling just trigger those hormones in our brain, right? It just makes that reward system, it elevates it and it increases it. The problem with our reward system is when we do something one time, if we duplicate it and do it again, guess what happens in our brain? Your brain releases half of the hormone when you do it again. So what do you have to do? You have to do more of it to get the same effect to your body. This is why we drink more if you struggle with alcohol. It's why we gamble more if you struggle with gambling. It's why shop, food, my drug is food. Unfortunately, the way the body works, we are programmed towards these addictions. That's what our physiology is. And so we're constantly pursuing things. We don't even know it. It's all subconscious, right? It's just back there in our brain. We're pursuing that next thing because it's going to make us feel good. But if it's not a bigger thing, if it's not a bigger house, if it's not a faster car or a nicer car, right? If it's not a Plymouth Horizon. I didn't have to go far from a Plymouth Horizon, right? Because I went to a Ford LTD next, and that was a step up. Only two of you know what a Ford LTD is. Okay. There was a time in my life where I thought I needed a Lexus LS 430, which is a really fancy car and a really expensive car, right? My son thinks I need it. Because when you go lateral, and God forbid we go backwards, we don't get that hit. Now, we're not aware of that. We chase, what do we call this? We chase the American dream. Now, I love America. I love this system. It's made me who I am. I've done very well in it. I don't hide that fact. I'm not against that. Here's what I am against. I'm against getting to the point where all we do is feed that machine, that voice in our head, our biology. You see, when we're chasing that, I think we're doing the exact opposite of what we were created to do. What we were created to do is to help other people. Now, it's not bad to save. It's not bad to have things. I am not here to shame you for your stuff. Don't hear that. Please don't hear that. I have lots of things. I have too many things. My house is full of crap. Amazon, I hate Amazon. Anybody else hate Amazon? I love and hate it. It's a love-hate relationship. We just have so much stuff. I believe when we're living the life of which we were created to be, which is to realize that actually what we have is enough. We actually don't have to chase the next thing. Now, this isn't a lesson for employers, like how you pay your people or how you do stuff like this. This is a lesson on accepting what we have is enough and to realize that we're chasing those things, not because there's a God calling us to it, but for our own personal gain and our own personal well-being. Now, I grew up, a lot of you have heard the word prosperity gospel, and Joel Osteen gets a lot of hate for this, and while I don't agree with a lot of what he says, I grew up, and when I heard the gospel, or the gospel was preached to me, when I say gospel, gospel means good news. Right? We link that to the Bible, but it's more than just the Bible. Good news is good news. If it's good news, it's good news. And so the Bible is a part of that. I grew up, and there were promises in the Bible, is how it was described to me. Anybody else hear that language growing up? There's promises. And so there's Old Testament and there's New Testament. In the Old Testament, we have wisdom literature. So wisdom literature is 3 basic books. I mean, all of it's wisdom, but there's a lot of wisdom that we read about in Psalms, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. And in these 3 books, lots of deep, deep wisdom. We actually see similar writings like this in other cultures. It's not unique to Christianity. A lot of duplicates, a lot of stories, a lot of things that existed before the Bible, and then some of them took from the Bible and made it their own. And we did the same with some of our stories. So in this deep wisdom literature that was written thousands and thousands of years ago, there is deep meaning to who we are and why we are who we are. And I was taught that when you read these deep spiritual stories or these sayings or these phrases, that they were promises. And I was told it almost like a math equation. If you do this, you'll get this. And when you read Old Testament, especially in those 3 books, you'll see a lot of that. Blessed are those who, right? Jesus even uses some of that, but Jesus says stuff like, blessed are those who are meek, right? He talks about personal attitudes of who we are, for they will inherit the earth. In Old Testament, you'll see a lot of things like blessed are those, and there'll be a phrase. If you do a certain thing or act a certain way, then God will give you things. Now, while I can get there, in that understanding, I'm not a big fan of talking about God doling out rewards to people. If we just do the right things, then we'll be rewarded. I'm not a big fan of that, and I actually don't see evidence of that. If you've ever been to Africa or Central America and seen third world countries, you would understand why a person may not believe that. Because in this world today, there exists a lot of people who do not have. And if it was just about praying and believing in God blessing you, then why don't those people? Instead, I read that wisdom literature and the stuff in the Bible, I read that as people's experience with life. And that there's an opportunity that they had learned something and for us to learn from them. And so I'm going to read one of those scriptures that we call it from Ecclesiastes. You know what Ecclesiastes is? It's a great book. It's a short book. It's attributed to Solomon. We don't know if it was Solomon or not, but it's a person who was older, and he starts the book of Ecclesiastes out, and he says, it's all for nothing. This whole life is a sham. And he says, it's fleeting. And depending on which translation you read, he says, it's like mist. So think of a spray bottle that mists water. It's like mist or it's like smoke. You see it 1 second, and it's gone the next. And so this person is at the end of his life, and he said, I've had all that, and he lists it out. I've had all the women. I've had all the wealth. I've had all the houses, all the castles. And he lists everything that he could possibly want. He's like, I had it all. And you know what? It means nothing. And at the end, he comes back to, not the end, over and over again. He just says, you know what? What I have is today, this present moment. And those things mean nothing. They're meaningless. They're like mist or smoke. So I'm going to read from Ecclesiastes 5, starting at verse 10. He said, the person who loves money will never have all the money that he or she wants. The person who loves wealth will not be satisfied when he gets it. This is also useless. This was written 3,200 years ago. Isn't it interesting that 3,200 years ago, that humanity was struggling with the same things that we're struggling with today? You know, I like to think that we progress in our humanity, that we're better people than people were 3,200 years ago, and I'm just not sure. I mean, I think we're good people. We actually live in the safest time in history, right? There's less violence than there was 3,200 years ago, but we still struggle with all the same things. It just moves from situation or from issue to issue. We can't quite seem to curb it. And so 3,200 years ago, they're talking about, man, if you make all the money in the world, it means nothing. It won't change your life. A person who loves wealth will not be satisfied when he gets it. It's useless. The more wealth the person has, the more friends he has to help him spend it. Anybody ever experienced that? Anybody have kids? You know that story if you have kids. He who has money will find family and friends, right? So what does he really gain? He gains nothing except to look at his riches. A man who works hard sleeps in peace. It is not important if he has little or much to eat, but a rich person worries about his wealth. He cannot sleep. How many of you have ever laid awake at night and be like, man, that retirement account, that stock market. Anybody ever done that? Liars. I have seen something unfair here on earth. A person suffers harm from saving up his money. Then he loses it in a bad deal, so he has nothing to give his son or daughter. A person comes into this world with nothing, and when he dies, he leaves with nothing. In spite of all his hard work, he leaves exactly how he came. Now that's Solomon, or somebody at least attributed to Solomon, saying wise words 3,200 years ago about always wanting more. And this person actually gained all of it. By their standards, you couldn't gain anything else. And after gaining all those things, was still searching for something. Why? Because he was only taking care of his body, of his physiology. He wasn't chasing the important stuff, the heart, the soul, the spirit, the things that really matter. Those weren't being lifted up. And so it was in the pursuit of that, the pursuit of money, that dopamine hit, that excitement. And at the end of his life, he looks back on it and says, oh my gosh, I missed out on so much. Timothy plays on these words. He would have known Ecclesiastes probably, not Timothy. Paul's writing to Timothy in the book of Timothy. So Ecclesiastes, Old Testament, 3,200 years ago. Paul's about 2,000 years ago, just under. So Paul probably would have known that scripture. Paul says this, and he's given Timothy advice. Okay? Was Paul writing the Bible? Negative. Paul was writing a letter to one of his friends. Actually, to one of his apprentices. Padawan, for you Star Wars fans. He says this. He says, it is true that serving God makes a person very rich. Right? That's that promise thing. You ever heard that? If you serve God, you'll be rich. So he says, yeah, that's true. If he is satisfied with what he has. Paul says you can claim that promise. For those of you that grew up in a faith where we were talking about claiming promises that God has for us, you can say that. If you serve God, you'll be rich. But what being rich means is being happy or satisfied with what you have. When we came into the world, we brought nothing, and when we die, we can take nothing out, right? He's quoting Ecclesiastes. So if we have food and clothes, we will be satisfied with that. Now, how many of you are happy and satisfied with just your food and clothes? Nobody. Okay, maybe one. Most of us are not going to be happy with just food and clothes, but he says if you have that, you should be happy. Those who want to become rich bring temptation to themselves. They are caught in a trap. They begin to want many foolish things that will hurt them, things that will ruin and destroy people. Now, a lot of you know this next phrase. The love of money causes all kinds of evil. Some people have left the true faith because they want to get more and more money, but they have caused themselves much, much sorrow. What I find interesting is books, letters, things that were written thousands of years ago tell us a certain thing about ourselves. That the pursuit of these things, that always trying to get them and grab them, and that they're always going for the next thing, that it doesn't bring any kind of joy or happiness. What's interesting is science tells us the exact same thing. Every time I read a science book, because my engineer brain wants to know why is something doing it, and I read something and they're like, oh yeah, fasting's really good for you. I'm like, yeah, we've known that for 3,000 years, right? Oh, praying before a meal or just simply being grateful, right? We don't need to bless our food anymore. It's not bad, doesn't have all these bad things in it. Well, some of our food has bad things in it. But like being grateful before a meal, science tells us, right? This is real science. That if you do that, it actually aids in digestion. We just went through a cohort with our daughter where she was in an intensive program for 4 weeks from 7 a.m. until 4 p.m. every day. And like, you know what? She has digestive issues. She has all this intense pain and her brain doesn't work right and all this intense pain. And so one of the things they suggest is before you eat a meal, to help that pain to go down, to help your digestive system, to breathe, right? If you're a prayer, say a prayer, meditate, to be grateful. When we know that gratefulness, that something happens in the brain, and guess what it does? It biologically changes your chemistry so that you can digest your food better. Like, yeah, we know that. We've been doing this for thousands of years, praying before our meals. I love it when science finally catches up with our spirituality. Isn't it great? The Bible's not a thing to be used to hurt each other, to beat people over the head. It's a thing to be read, to gather wisdom from, to look at it and say, oh my gosh, why are we still struggling with this exact same thing we struggled with 3,200 years ago? Why do we constantly want more? When are we going to realize that what we have, regardless of what it is actually enough? I'm a stats person. I love stats. You know this. So I thought, it's always good to hear, because not many of us look at these things. And I'm always intrigued by this. Mainly because I'm an achiever on an Enneagram, I'm a 3, and I'm competitive in one of my top 5 strengths. Right? So I want to know where I rank. It's really important to me. It's stupid, but I want to know where I rank. And so it goes back to this, right? If I can just achieve a little more. For some reason, I think I'm a little more loved. I'm heavily involved in our chamber, and we were at a meeting a couple weeks ago, and giving all the data for Missouri and for the country. And, during the pandemic, I think we spent $4 trillion in subsidies and the 2 different packages that were passed. And Americans saved $2 trillion of that. We had more savings, $2 trillion in savings, than we ever had before in the history of mankind. $2 trillion in savings. You know how much we have left now in 2023? We have less savings now than we did in 2019. We've actually gone backwards. We're in a spending trend right now. Okay, so I like to talk about, because this is about money, right? Chasing the next thing. Average household earning in America is roughly $94,000. That's per household. Okay? Now the average household expenditures, right? This is for like transportation, for food, for utilities, for housing payment, is about $73,000. Most of us spend about $1,000 a month on our vehicles. Some of us a little more, if you have lots of kids who like to drive and have cars. Food expenditures. How many of you feel like you're spending a lot more on food now than you were a couple years ago? I won't tell you the number. The number here is close to $1,000 a month per family. We were more than twice that a couple months ago. And we don't eat out, just for the record. That included toiletries and everything. That's how we tend to spend our money. So about 78% of our money is spent on those basic things. That leaves only about 22% of our income for other things. For those of you who have young children, childcare. For those of us that have older children, competitive sports, right? I need a 3rd mortgage at this point just to keep up with competitive dance and competitive, all the things, right? And of course, all of you, I don't have to tell you all tithe your money, so I don't have to talk about that today. Nobody's laughing. Charitable giving amongst generations is down dramatically, right? So I'm a Gen X. We have, I think, several Xers here, and we have several millennials here. Let's talk about some generational debt. Now, when I looked this up, I thought we were going to find that millennials had a lot more debt. They don't, actually. So the greatest amount of debt is from my generation. We hold, I think, $154 billion, I think that's what it is, in debt. The average person is $154,000 in debt for Gen X. Millennials are number 2 at 115. Boomers, which surprised me, I thought they'd have their stuff paid off by now, slackers, are about 100,000. And of course, our Gen Zs have about 23,000. Men have more debt than women, about 20% more on average, whether it's credit cards or student loans or houses, whatever it might be. One of my questions that I ask my family all the time as we're pursuing new things, what is the next thing? What are we saving up for? You know, what is our goal? Is we have to look at how we're spending our money. How many of you budget in your household? A few of you? Jeff, you were just talking about it last night, weren't you? A little bit? You just don't say no to her? She gets whatever she wants? Okay, that's fair. I'll have her ask you for money next time we need it. Budgeting is really important. How we spend our money, to look at that is really important. I was surprised to see that a lot of people don't actually budget and look at how they're spending their money. When we don't budget, we're just constantly seeing something and saying, ooh, I want that, and then we go and buy it. Why? Because we don't have to save up to buy it anymore. We can go get a loan, we can get a credit card, we can get a car loan. I was surprised to see that personal debt, personal loans, the average personal loan, people have $18,000. Who gives $18,000 to a person on a personal loan? Not backed by real estate or a car or a credit card, just personal loans. That's a lot. How we spend our money is really important. To look at that, to say, you know what, we're going to do this. This is really important. Next week, we'll get into, in the history of faith and faith communities and church, we have this name called tithe. Have you ever heard of what a tithe? What's a tithe? It's 10%. That's what all it means, right? There's some good numbers behind that. We'll dig into that a little bit next week. But my challenge to you today is, it's pretty simple. Where are you spending your money? What are you spending it on? One of the first steps in tracking that and to realizing that we have enough is to realize where it's going. How many of you are shocked when you get your credit card bill at the end of the month? Like, my wife is really good. She downloads it into an Excel spreadsheet and she puts it on all the things. And I'm like, how do we spend that much? And she's like, you're an idiot. We spend that much every month. And I'm like, okay. And you fight about money? We have more disagreements and arguments about money than anything else. Anybody else? Nobody? Y'all are a little quiet this morning. Jesus actually talks more about money, and people are surprised to hear that. He talks more about money than anything else in the Bible. When I always ask that question, people are like, he talks about love. I'm like, nope, it's money. Socioeconomic conditions, that's what Jesus talks about more than anything else. So the challenge is simple, to look at how you're spending your money. I'm going to end with a story about my father-in-law. My father-in-law, who was like a dad to me. My dad and I were never close. We still, he's in assisted living. I see him on occasion, but we've never, rough upbringing, without going into details and airing all my dirty laundry, just a lot of baggage with that relationship with my dad. And so I've had good people come into my life. Stacy's dad, my father-in-law, was one of them. His name was Tim. And when Stacy's pregnant with our first child, I had one before, but with our first child, I made the incredible decision that I was going to buy a house, right, and fix it up. And I bought this house, and I'm working every day, and he had just retired. And one day he called me because, you know what, I want to come help you. I'm like, okay. So that man, for like 3 months, got up every day, came to work with me, and like two times a week, we'd go on Taco Tuesday, right, and sometimes on Fridays, we'd go to lunch. We'd always have Mexican food, and there was this Mexican restaurant. Now, Stacy didn't grow up with a whole lot either. I don't think they were ever homeless, but they didn't have a whole lot. And she has 2 sisters and herself, and I mean, Mom stayed home and took care of them and had some odds and ends jobs. Dad was a fireman and did some other things as well, but I mean, they didn't have a whole lot. Lots of hand-me-downs and lots of stuff like that. And one time we're at lunch, and I know they don't have a whole lot, right? And they probably had more then, but they actually ended up raising our niece or their granddaughter. And we're at lunch one day, and every time we went to lunch, he paid. I mean, it didn't matter. Now, we weren't in a great financial situation. Then we were trying to invest in this house and do some things. And he would pay because he's like, that's my job, right? I'm the father figure, I'm going to pay. Anybody else have a dad or a grandpa like that? Like, you never got to pay for anything if they were there. And so we're there, and every time he would pay, and I was like, Tim, what are you doing? He goes, you know what I find? And Stacy's told me plenty of stories about this, but we're at a Mexican restaurant in Independence. He goes, I find, you know what, at the end of the month, there's always just enough. And I'm looking at him. Now, I'm a numbers guy, right? I want to know our budget. I want to know where we are. I want to track the numbers. My engineer brain wants to know where it's all going, right? And so for a person, my father-in-law, the person I look up to, who loves me, who's spending every day with me, helping me to fix up this house when I'm 25 years old, right, is sitting across the table from me saying, I think there'll be enough. It just seems to grow like on trees. And I about lost my mind. Does that bug any of the rest of you? There'll be enough. There always just seems to be enough. At the time, that really bothered me. And actually, up until not that long ago, that really bothered me. I mean, really bothered me. Like, how did he raise you, right? And he raised his daughter that way, and that has caused some arguments between us. And, right? That's how she was raised. And I was raised, there's not enough, right? Scarcity. Got to save all you can. John Wesley said, do as much good as you can for all the people you can for as long as you can. I was like, make as much money as you can, save as much as you can, so you can keep as much as you can, right? That was my philosophy in life. And so we're sitting there, and I'm across the table from him. This guy's a mentor to me, and I'm like, you are insane. What do you mean there just happens to be enough? He passed away, 10, 11 years ago. And while he was here on this earth and a mentor and a father to me, I never knew what he was trying to tell me. And he taught me so many things. That man taught me so many life lessons. Now, I'm not saying not to budget. I'm not saying not to track your spending. He wasn't good with money, so hear me say that. But what he was good at, that man, most generous man I've ever met. Hands down, not a single person I've ever met is more generous than that man. Nobody. He didn't have a dime to his name. The man had no 401k, no savings. He had a small pension from being a fireman, had nothing in life, but would literally give you the shirt off his back, would pay for a meal every time we went to dinner. And what he taught me was that, what I've come to learn actually, is that he was comfortable with what he had. He wasn't chasing the next thing. His wife, my mother-in-law, still lives in the same house they bought like 40 years ago that was moved to that location by horse and buggy because it was built in the 1800s. I'm not making that up. On a stone foundation. He'd drive, those Toyota vans? That look like terrorist vans, you know what I'm talking about? He drove one of those for 547 years. That thing had 500,000 miles on it. And it would hold a sheet of drywall. And so when he'd come over to help me, we'd go to Home Depot. Every other day, and we'd load up a bunch of crap in the back of that thing. And the back would be squatting down. Toyota, right? Good thing. Just be dragging along. He didn't need that stuff. He may have been bad with money, but doggone it, that man lived more life than I'll ever live. Because he was generous. He knew that money was not something for him to hold on to. Money was not something for him to dam up, to keep and to collect. Money was a thing that just flowed through him, and it literally flowed through him to other people. That man had a heart. And he taught me that if I wanted that the promises that are in the Bible, because I didn't learn that from reading the Bible. I learned that because a man showed me that the more generous you are, the better your life is. Now, I can't tell you that's a science equation. I can't tell you that's a math equation. I can't explain it to you in a linear fashion, but what I can tell you is my experience. I'm here today because generous people invested in me. Generous people loved me. Generous people. It's not a story for this week. Somebody bought my family a house because our house burned down when I was a kid. To live a generous life is the antithesis. It's the exact opposite of constantly trying to achieve and to get the new thing. And if you want to curb that desire, You want to change that in your life? You want to live differently? You want to live like Tim? And I've met only a handful of people that have been able to live like Tim. You want to live like Tim? Live generously. Give it away. Jesus literally says this to a person who's rich and young. What do I have to do to be a part of the kingdom? He's like, you want to live? You want to live right now? Sell it all and give it away. Now, I'm not telling you got to sell everything, give it away. But what I am telling you is what you have now is enough. For you to realize that is really important. I believe there's a God and a spirit and a connection amongst us that is leading us to a place that says what we have right now is enough. We don't need more. We don't need the next thing. And if you want to find joy and happiness and freedom, you find that in being generous. You find that in helping others. That and that premise is why faith communities exist. We serve 7,000 to 8,000 meals every summer, right? We do this. We pool our money. We take our resources and we get it together and we go and we feed people. Every weekend we send home almost 200 meals with students in our family. We come together. That's why we exist, so that we can be generous. We become the conduit, at least one of the conduits, one of the vehicles in our communities that branch out wherever we are in our places, wherever we live, wherever we work, in our communities, and we love on people and we help them. Do we need to keep the lights on and stuff like that? Yeah, sure. We don't have a mortgage here. There's some operational cost. I hate this part. We don't pass an offering plate here, just by the way. If you're visiting here, I'm sorry you got the money sermon today. I'll be here all month. And if you're visiting, there's not an expectation. But if you're a part of this community, you'll notice when you walked in today, there's a little bulletin, right? And on the bottom of that bulletin, there's a commitment card section. Once a year, we come together and we say, generosity is really important. To live generously, to live that way is the way we can go beyond ourselves, to live outside of that, to not have to chase that. It's the vehicle, it's the mechanism that God gave us to be better people. And if you go to church here, I hope you see that. I hope you can participate in that. We don't pass offering plates. I don't talk a lot about money. But once a year, I come to you and say, listen, this is important. And I ask you to pledge. I ask you to say, listen, we can do this. And it's not out of guilt. It's not because God told you to. It's because we want to. It's because something deep inside of us is satisfied when we can be generous to those around us. So I ask you to prayerfully consider that. You can fill it out, think about it, drop it in one of our offering boxes. I hate ending sermons that way. This is really important stuff. As you think about ways to be generous, let's go to God in prayer. God, we thank you for the opportunity to think outside of ourselves, to be generous people, God, to not always need more, to realize that what we have is enough. God, help us to be those kind of people. God, help us to remember that it's only through our generosity that we can achieve that. God, thank you for the opportunities all around us to be able to do that. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for all the things that we do possess. Help us to see as those things that can flow through us, to be there for other people. God, we love you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Will you stand and sing with us? I've carried a burden for too long on my own. I wasn't created to bear it alone. I hear your invitation to let it all go. I see it now. I'm laying it down, and I know that I need you. I run to the Father, fall into grace, done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend So I'll run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, oh. You saw my condition, had a plan from the start. Your Son for redemption, the price for my heart. And I don't have a context for that kind of love. I don't understand, I can't comprehend. All I know is I need you. I run to the Father, fall into grace, done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend, so I'll run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, 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 and again and again. Oh, 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 my heart has been in your sights long before my first breath. Running into your arms is running to life from death. And I feel this rush deep in my chest. Your mercy is calling out, and just as I am, you pull me in, and I know I need you now. I run to the Father, fall into grace, done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend, so I run to the Father again and again. I run to the Father, fall into grace, done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart found a surgeon, my soul found a friend, so I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, 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 and again and again. Oh, 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 and again and again.
May we realize that what we have is enough. May we go from this place, may we be loving, affirming, and most importantly today, may we be generous. Amen.
Nice, y'all. That was really beautiful today. Really beautiful. Thank you. Oh, we got to get a picture. Picture, yeah, yeah, yeah.
You'll send it in for us?
Yeah. Isn't it nice?
Sometimes it's nice to just break things, like really break things down.
Uncomplicate.
Yes. Can you get us on, or should I move? You're a rock star.
Is it okay if I turn off, Brian? I think I'm still coming through the system.
Hey, Max, can I get your help, buddy?
Okay. You don't care? Great.
Thanks, dude. I need your big, strong muscles.